In the sands of time, where civilizations are born and fade away, lies an enigma that challenges our understanding of ancient history. Long before Rome built its empire or the Greeks debated philosophy, a civilization flourished on the Indian subcontinent with a disconcerting sophistication, only to vanish into an almost absolute silence. This is the story of the Indus Valley civilization, an urban culture that rivaled Mesopotamia and Egypt, but whose legacy is shrouded in deep mystery, a striking introduction to the secrets that India holds. We find ourselves in the 3rd millennium before Christ, on the banks of the mighty Indus River. In what is today Pakistan and northwestern India, planned metropolises such as Harappa and Mohenjo-daro emerged. They were not mere villages, but urban centres with astonishing organisation, streets laid out in a perfect grid, uniformly sized baked brick houses, and, most notably, the first known urban sanitation system in the world, with covered drains and private bathrooms in every home. How, in a barely emerging world, did a society achieve such a feat of engineering and organisation without leaving behind the monumental palaces, tombs, or temples that characterise its contemporaries? This quantum leap did not arise from nothing. It was the result of a long process of sedentarization. Nomadic communities of hunter-gatherers began to settle, mastering agriculture in the fertile floodplains. Crops such as wheat, barley, and crucially cotton not only ensured their sustenance but also allowed for a surplus that fueled population growth and specialization of labor. This was the foundation upon which a complex network of cooperation, trade, and ultimately a civilization that spanned more than 1 million square kilometers was built. The architects of this society are anonymous. Their names have been lost, but their collective genius is etched in the brick and mortar of their cities. The meticulous urban planning suggests the existence of a centralized authority, a form of government capable of coordinating massive construction projects, managing food distribution, and standardizing weights and measures across a vast territory. This uniformity is one of the greatest enigmas. How did they maintain such cohesion without the evidence of an oppressive royal or priestly power that we see in other ancient cultures? Their world was not isolated. Steatite seals with an undeciphered script found even in Mesopotamia demonstrate that they were part of an international trade network. They exchanged cotton, exotic woods, and lapis lazuli for metals and other goods. This interaction with distant cultures undoubtedly enriched their society, but the question remains, were they a melting pot of influences, or did they forge a singular and autonomous identity? The silence of their writing is deafening, leaving the artifacts to speak for themselves. And then, the silence became definitive. By around 1900 before Christ, these magnificent cities began to decline until they were abandoned. What cataclysm silenced such a vibrant civilization? The theories are as numerous as the mysteries surrounding them. Was it the fury of nature, with relentless droughts that dried up the rivers, or catastrophic floods that altered the landscape? A climate change that made their agriculture unsustainable, or perhaps the arrival of new peoples such as the Aryans who brought with them war and ruin, without written records narrating their end? We can only speculate, turning their collapse into the final act of their great mystery. The consequences of their disappearance were transformative. Urban life receded and populations dispersed into smaller rural communities. However, their legacy did not extinguish completely. Their innovations in agriculture, urban planning, and trade laid hidden foundations upon which future cultures of India would rise. Although their writing was lost and their gods forgotten, the influence of the Indus Valley civilization endures as a ghostly echo in the history of the subcontinent. Despite decades of excavations and studies, we have barely begun to scratch the surface of this enigma. Each artifact discovered raises more questions than answers, inviting us to continue exploring. The mystery of why such an advanced civilization left behind no decipherable language or monuments to its leaders remains the greatest challenge for archaeologists. The void they left would not remain unoccupied for long. From the ashes of this enigma, a new era would be born, one defined not by bricks and aqueducts but by hymns and rituals. The arrival of the Vedic peoples will mark the beginning of a new chapter, one that will shape the spirituality and social structure of India for millennia. What revelations will this new stage in the history of India hold for us? If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. The shadow of the advanced civilization of the Indus Valley was slowly fading, giving way to a new cultural dawn. The memory of its achievements, although diffuse, seemed to persist in the collective memory of those who inhabited the vast plain of the Indian subcontinent. This transition would not be simple. The emergence of a new culture was about to shape what we today know as Hinduism, a spiritual legacy that endures through the centuries. In this historical canvas, the Vedas emerge as the pillars of a tradition that has shaped the identity of millions. In the context of the Vedic era, around 1500 before Christ, the arrival of Indo-European peoples, known as the Aryans, in northern India, marked a fundamental change. These groups, with their own cultural heritage and belief systems, settled in the Ganges region. The interaction with local communities, descendants of the Indus culture, generated a melting pot where ideas, traditions, and rituals intertwined, giving life to a society in constant evolution. In this scenario, the political and social environment was one of exploration and adaptation, where the Aryan tribes sought to establish their place in a world already inhabited. Among the key figures of this era are the sages and rishis, revered figures who dedicated themselves to meditation and deep reflection. It is said that they were the ones who, in the forests and valleys, began to channel their spiritual experiences into verses that would give rise to the Vedas. These sacred texts would not only serve as the foundation of Hinduism, but would also act as a record of the Vedic worldview, encompassing everything from sacrificial rituals to complex philosophical reflections. The Vedas were divided into four major collections: Rigveda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, and Atharvaveda, each with its own focus, yet united by a common thread, the pursuit of knowledge and connection with the divine. Developing over several centuries, the composition of these texts took place in an environment of fervent intellectual activity. The earliest manifestations of the Rigveda, composed in the form of hymns, reflected an agricultural and pastoral society that revered deities such as Indra, the god of war and storm, Varuna, the guardian of cosmic order, and Agni, the god of fire and messenger of the gods. These deities were not distant entities, they were forces that influenced daily life. Ritual sacrifices, in turn, became a form of communication between mortals and the divine, where devotion and respect for the forces of nature were fundamental. As the Vedas evolved, so did the associated practices. The Samaveda, for example, focused on music and singing, transforming the recitation of the verses into a collective experience that united the community. The Yajurveda, on the other hand, concentrated on the formulas and procedures for rituals and offerings, establishing a protocol that would be followed in religious ceremonies for generations. The question that arises is what motivated those sages to capture their revelations in such a precise oral tradition, which would be transmitted accurately for centuries before being written down. The impact of the Vedic era was profound and multifaceted. The social structure began to delineate into varnas, or functional classes, which would later transform into the complex caste system. This hierarchy not only defined each individual's place in society, but also influenced their access to education and spiritual roles. The figure of the Brahmin, the priest and guardian of knowledge, emerged as a pillar in this new social organization, while the warriors, merchants, and farmers and workers occupied their designated roles. This classification, although possibly functional in its origin, would sow the seeds of social divisions that would resonate throughout history. However, the Vedic era was not only a time of creation and order, it was also a period of conflict and adaptation, where the Aryan tribes faced indigenous populations that resisted their influence. The epic tales that would later emerge, such as the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, reflect these tensions, offering a mirror of the struggle for power, justice, and dharma, or moral duty. These narratives have been interpreted in multiple ways, and historians debate the extent to which they represent historical events or are allegories shaped by those seeking to legitimize their position in a conflicted world. As the Vedic era progressed, the impact of the Vedas extended beyond the borders of India. Over time, these sacred texts would influence other cultures and religions in the region, generating a legacy that would endure through the centuries. Yet, the mystery persists. How much of what was composed in those ancient verses reflects the historical reality of the time? And how much is a mythological construction intended to endure in collective memory? The immediate consequences of these events were remarkable. The emerging social structure and ritual practices not only defined the spirituality of the time, but also laid the foundations for the development of a rich and diverse culture. The Vedas, in their essence, became the common thread of a tradition that, despite transformations, has managed to maintain its core throughout the millennia. Looking back, the enigma persists. What secrets still awaited in the depths of those sacred texts? What hidden truths lie within their verses? As the Vedic era unfolds before our eyes, a new chapter awaits on the horizon. The history of India is about to come to life with the formation of the Mahajanapadas. Great kingdoms emerging in the north, forging a new political and cultural landscape that will forever change the destiny of this vast land. The initial political fragmentation of the Vedic era would soon give way to a new era of transformations. With the echoes of ancient civilizations resonating in the air, northern India was preparing for the emergence of the Mahajanapadas, a political phenomenon that would set the tone for regional history. During the 6th century before Christ, the political landscape became more complex and diverse, with the formation of large kingdoms and republics that would forever change the way societies were organized and governed. The Mahajanapadas, which translate as great kingdoms or great domains, emerged in a context of instability and change. The legacy of the Indus Valley civilization, along with the impact of Vedic culture, had left an indelible mark on Indian society. However, the dissolution of old tribal structures provided fertile ground for a new era to flourish. In this time of crossroads, groups of charismatic leaders began to consolidate their authority, creating political entities that rivaled in power and influence. At the center of this transformation were figures such as Bimbisara, the king of Magadha, and his successor, Ajatashatru. Bimbisara, known for his political cunning and ability to form strategic alliances, was fundamental in the expansion of the kingdom of Magadha, turning it into one of the most powerful Mahajanapadas. His decision to establish marital ties with other dynasties was an example of the diplomatic ingenuity that characterized this period. Historians wonder what secrets of power and strategy lay behind his decisions. The development of the Mahajanapadas was not an isolated process. Several kingdoms such as Kosala, Vatsa, and Avanti began to establish themselves, each with its own political and social dynamics. The republics known as Ganasanghas also played a crucial role. These systems of government where power was shared among several leaders or assemblies represented an alternative to hereditary monarchy. The Confederation of Vriji, which included clans such as the Lichavi, illustrates how the decentralization of power could coexist with the growing ambition for territorial unification. As these kingdoms and republics expanded, trade routes multiplied and cultural interactions flourished. Trade, art, and philosophy began to intertwine in a vibrant network that encompassed not only India, but also regions beyond its borders. Cities like Pataliputra became centers of culture and commerce, pulsating with the vitality of a new social order. However, in this environment of growth and change, tensions also arose. Rivalries among the Mahajanapadas intensified, creating a climate of competition that would lead to armed conflicts. The decisions of the leaders of these kingdoms not only affected their own destiny, but also shaped the future of the entire region. The territorial expansion of Magadha, driven by Ajatashatru, was a clear example of how a single kingdom could influence the balance of power. His military campaigns against neighboring kingdoms such as Kosala and the Confederation of Vriji unleashed a cycle of conquests that left a lasting legacy. Historical debates continue regarding the extent to which these conquests were the result of strategy and diplomacy, and how much was due to brute force and unchecked ambition. In this context of constant political evolution, the Mahajanapadas laid the foundations for the future unification of the subcontinent. The interaction between these political entities, their alliances and rivalries, forged a political map that would become increasingly intricate. The wars and treaties that arose from these interactions not only defined borders but also delineated regional cultural identities. The immediate consequences of this period were significant. The consolidation of power in the hands of a few kingdoms meant a change in the social structure. Merchants and artisans began to gain greater relevance, and social classes diversified. The emergence of new philosophical and religious currents, such as Buddhism and Jainism, was directly influenced by this context of change and questioning of old structures. The Mahajanapadas not only transformed the political landscape, they also sowed the seeds of a cultural renaissance that would resonate through the centuries. However, the rise of the Mahajanapadas poses a dilemma. Was this a period of progress and unity, or did the struggles for power and the ambition of leaders lead to an endless cycle of conflicts and divisions? The history of these kingdoms is a reflection of human complexity, where the quest for power intertwines with the desire for peace and stability. The secrets and hidden truths that lie in the shadows of this era marked by ambition continue to be a subject of study. As the Mahajanapadas consolidated, a new chapter in the history of India began to take shape. The shadow of their legacy would endure, marking the path toward the unification of the subcontinent under the Maurya Empire. In this transition, the figure of Chandragupta Maurya would rise as a beacon of change, indicating the emergence of a centralized power that would transform the political landscape of India forever. History was about to take a surprising turn, and the decisions made in the future would have repercussions that would resonate through time. This political fragmentation would soon open the doors to one of the most decisive eras in Indian history, the rise of the Maurya Empire. In a context where the subcontinent was divided into kingdoms and republics in constant conflict, a new power began to emerge from the shadows of history. Chandragupta Maurya, a bold leader of uncertain origin, appeared as the central figure of this transformation. With his cunning and determination, he set out to unify much of India, bringing disparate territories under a single banner. The political atmosphere of the time was tumultuous. Various dynasties fought for control, and wars between different kingdoms were a constant. Instability was the norm. It was amid this chaos that Chandragupta found his opportunity. With the guidance of the strategist and philosopher Kautilya, also known as Chanakya, an audacious plan was forged. Kautilya, through his treatise on the art of governance, the Arthashastra, provided Chandragupta with the necessary strategies to dismantle the old power structures and establish a new order. Historians debate whether it was the ambition of one man that drove the unification or if deeper historical forces were at play. Chandragupta began his campaign in the north, where the weakness of rival kingdoms became evident. With an organized army and innovative tactics, he quickly conquered the city-states of the region. His first major victory was over the powerful Nanda dynasty, which had dominated northern India for a considerable time. The fall of the Nanda marked a turning point. Chandragupta, now king, established the capital of his new empire in Pataliputra, which would flourish as a cultural and political center. But the story of Chandragupta does not end there. After consolidating his power in the east, he turned his attention to the northwest, where the forces of the successors of Alexander the Great controlled part of the territory. This confrontation, although brief, was crucial. The withdrawal of the Greek forces left a power vacuum that Chandragupta was able to exploit, expanding his empire westward. With each victory, the empire grew, and his fame spread, generating both admiration and fear. As his domains expanded, so did his ambition. However, the consolidation of the Maurya Empire was not solely due to military strength. Chandragupta implemented reforms that laid the foundation for effective administration. He introduced a tax system that, although rigorous, ensured the economic stability of his empire. Infrastructure projects such as roads and irrigation systems facilitated trade and communication, further uniting the territories under his command. This development not only fostered economic growth but also encouraged a sense of shared identity among the diverse peoples of his empire. In this vast amalgamation of territories, new cultural and political synergies were forming. The figure of Chandragupta was followed by his grandson, Ashoka, who would become one of the most celebrated rulers in world history. Unlike his grandfather, Ashoka is known not only for his military power but for his profound spiritual transformation. After the devastating War of Kalinga, which resulted in a large-scale massacre, Ashoka faced a moral dilemma. The weight of the lost lives resonated in his conscience, and in an act of deep reflection, he decided to abandon military conquest in favor of an empire based on peace and morality, the Dharma. This radical shift marked the beginning of a new chapter in the history of the Maurya Empire. Under his leadership, Ashoka actively promoted Buddhism, fostering non-violence and religious tolerance. His edicts, inscribed on pillars and rocks throughout his empire, became a code of moral and ethical conduct not only for his subjects but for the entire region. The dissemination of these Buddhist ideas had a lasting impact on Indian culture and beyond. It is remarkable how the change in perspective of a single man could transform the social fabric of an entire empire. Ashoka's reforms included the establishment of hospitals for people and animals, the construction of roads and inns for travelers, and the promotion of general welfare, reflecting a government concerned for the care of its citizens. His legacy became a symbol of ethics in leadership, and his decision to renounce war as a means of expansion set a precedent that would resonate through the centuries. However, despite his attempt to offer a benevolent government, the end of his reign left an empire that, although vast, was beginning to show signs of fragmentation under the weight of administrative complexity and regional ambitions. The immediate consequences of these events were profound. The unification of much of the subcontinent under the Maurya Empire laid the groundwork for a sense of cultural identity that would endure. The influence of Ashoka and his edict of non-violence resonated in the philosophy and practices of future leaders and movements. Nevertheless, the shadow of ambition and internal conflicts began to mark the fate of the empire. Could such a vast and diverse empire sustain itself against the inherent tensions of its own magnitude? The enigma of the Maurya Empire lies in the duality of its legacy. On one hand, it is a symbol of unity and prosperity. On the other, it represents the tensions and contradictions that arise in a vast and heterogeneous territory. As the Maurya Empire faded, India was preparing to enter a new era of cultural and political flourishing, leading us to explore the golden age of the Gupta Empire, where science and the arts would reach new heights in a context of stability and creativity. This unification under the Maurya Empire would soon fade, giving way to a new era of splendor and creativity. The era of the Gupta, which spanned approximately from the 4th century to the 6th century after Christ, stands as a beacon of light in the history of India, a period that many historians consider a true golden age. During these years, the subcontinent experienced an unprecedented flourishing in the arts, literature, science, and philosophy. But what factors allowed this era to thrive, and what legacy did it leave that still resonates in contemporary India? The historical context surrounding the era of the Gupta is characterized by a remarkable shift following the disintegration of the Maurya Empire. From its ashes, small kingdoms emerged, vying for control and influence. However, the arrival of the Gupta dynasty under the leadership of Chandragupta I marks a cultural and political renaissance. This emperor, who rose in northern India, established an efficient and centralized administration that allowed for peace and stability in the region, creating an environment conducive to the flourishing of culture. Chandragupta I, although not as renowned as his successor, was fundamental in consolidating Gupta power. His marriage to the Licchavi princess, a strategic political union, not only expanded his territory but also reinforced his legitimacy. With his son, Samudragupta, the dynasty reached even greater splendor. This warrior king, sometimes referred to as the Napoleon of India for his military campaigns, expanded the empire, but his legacy is not limited to conquest. His appreciation for the arts and his patronage of poets and scholars laid the foundations for a cultural renaissance. Among these prominent figures, Kalidasa stands out, considered one of the greatest playwrights and poets of Sanskrit literature, whose works such as Shakuntala and Meghaduta reflect a profound understanding of human nature and the beauty of life, elevating literature to new heights. Gupta poetry and drama, imbued with exquisite lyricism, not only celebrated love and nature but also explored the complexity of human emotions. Scholars wonder how these writers and artists managed to capture the essence of their time and of humanity with such mastery. As the Gupta Empire expanded, the sciences also flourished. From the rich mathematical tradition of India, figures such as Aryabhata emerged, a mathematician and astronomer who challenged the conceptions of the universe of his time. In his most famous work, the Aryabhatiya, he presented revolutionary theories about the rotation of the Earth, calculated a remarkably precise value for pi, and laid the foundations for the decimal system and the concept of zero. Ideas that would transform mathematics forever. It remains a mystery how many of his contemporaries glimpsed the depth of his thought. Medicine also made significant strides during the Gupta era. Texts such as the Sushruta Samhita, attributed to Sushruta, detailed complex surgical procedures, including plastic surgeries and cataract operations, while the Charaka Samhita, attributed to Charaka, offered a compendium on internal medicine. The emphasis on the holistic well-being of the patient and the importance of lifestyle has endured through the centuries. Despite these achievements, questions arise. How much knowledge has been lost in the transmission of these ancient teachings? Gupta art and architecture also reached their peak, with the construction of magnificent sculptures and temples that reflected both religious devotion and technical innovation. The paintings and sculptures of the caves of Ajanta and Ellora, for example, are not only a testament to artistic skill, but also reveal the intersection of religion and society. These masterpieces, adorned with intricate details, tell stories of the life of Buddha and of Hindu deities, inviting the viewer to contemplate the spirituality that permeated everyday life. These representations are a window to the past and a mirror reflecting the human quest for the divine. However, not everything was harmony and splendor. As the Gupta Empire strengthened, it also faced internal and external challenges. The administration of a vast territory required a delicate balance between the centralization of power and local autonomy. Tensions between various communities and the growing pressure from external invaders, such as the Huns, began to undermine the stability of the empire. Historians debate whether it was inevitable for such a large empire to face fragmentation, or if certain decisions by its leaders could have prevented its fall. The immediate consequences of this golden age were profound and multifaceted. The cultural and scientific wealth that emerged not only impacted India, but also spread to other parts of the world, influencing nearby civilizations. The expansion of trade and cultural exchange during this time laid the groundwork for future encounters between the East and the West. However, as the shadow of instability loomed over the empire, the future of this cultural legacy became uncertain. Thus, the era of the Gupta stands before us as an enigma, a chapter that not only celebrated human splendor, but also raised questions about the fragility of achievements. Was this golden age an inevitable destiny, or a series of decisions and circumstances that could have unfolded differently? With the decline of the Gupta Empire, the curtain was rising for a new era in the history of India. The currents of change began to flow, and emerging philosophies would soon intertwine with the growth of Buddhism and Jainism, transforming Indian society in ways that would still resonate in the future. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. This was an era of profound spiritual transformation. As the Gupta Empire flourished, two philosophical and religious currents that had emerged centuries earlier reached notable influence: Buddhism and Jainism. Born in the heart of the subcontinent, they offered not only a new spiritual framework, but also a radical shift in the way their followers related to the world and to one another. As the teachings of Buddha and Mahavira resonated in the communities, India experienced unprecedented growth in the pursuit of truth and self-realization. In the historical context of this period, India was marked by an amalgamation of cultures and traditions where Brahmanical Hinduism predominated, but not without challenges. The teachings of the Vedas and the associated rituals began to be questioned by new currents of thought. Society, stratified by the system of varnas, generated dissatisfaction with the rigidity of certain norms. In this environment of spiritual seeking, the echo of new ideas was strongly felt. Buddhism, founded by Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, and Jainism, revitalized by Mahavira, offered viable alternatives. Both philosophies, born from the same ascetic Sramana tradition, questioned the authority of sacrificial rituals and proposed a path to liberation based on ethics, meditation, and compassion. The key figures of this spiritual transformation are not mere shadows in history. Gautama Buddha, with his renunciation and his relentless quest for enlightenment, embodied an ideal of austere and contemplative living. Mahavira, whose real name was Vardhamana, stood out as a champion of non-violence and truth in its most radical form. Both leaders not only preached but also formed monastic communities that became centers of learning and reflection. Their decisions to renounce wealth and status in pursuit of a spiritual path resonated in a society eager for meaning. The development of these religious movements was gradual but impactful. Beginning in the 6th century before Christ, Buddhism began to gain followers in northern India, where cities such as Varanasi and Rajgir became centers of worship and teaching. The establishment of monasteries such as those in Sarnath, where Buddha delivered his first sermon, contributed to the expansion of his teachings. As Buddhism established itself, its influence spread along the Silk Road, reaching even remote regions of Central Asia and beyond. For its part, Jainism, although less expansive compared to Buddhism, cultivated a profound ethical way of life that sought the liberation of the soul through radical non-violence and austerity. Jain communities thrived, establishing centers of trade and education that reflected their commitment to ethics and knowledge. In this framework, Jains became influential merchants, carrying their principles to various corners of India, where their presence remains significant today. However, the growth of these religions was not a path free of obstacles. The ritual sacrifices and veneration of deities that characterized Vedic Hinduism did not disappear without resistance. The Brahmins, custodians of the Vedic tradition, saw in Buddhism and Jainism not only a threat to their authority, but also a challenge to the social structure they had defended for centuries. Thus, the tension between these currents of thought intensified, creating an environment of philosophical debate and at times confrontation. As time progressed, the Buddhist and Jain teachings began to leave an indelible mark on the daily lives of Indians. The ethics of non-violence, compassion and respect for all forms of life became integrated into popular culture. The literary and artistic works of the Gupta period were influenced by these ideals, reflecting an atmosphere of spiritual seeking. The stories of the lives of Buddha and Mahavira became recurring themes in sculpture and literature, revealing a legacy that would endure through the centuries. The immediate consequences of this transformation were remarkable. Buddhism and Jainism not only challenged the hegemony of Brahmanical Hinduism, but also promoted greater social inclusion. The followers of these religions, often coming from non-priestly classes, found in their teachings a space of belonging and dignity. In this sense, Buddhism and Jainism began to reform the perception of spirituality, moving away from the marked divisions of caste and proposing a more egalitarian view of human existence. Nevertheless, The lingering question is, how did Buddhism, once so influential in India, diminish to become a minority in its land of origin? As Jainism remained more localized and focused on its strict ethics, Buddhism, after losing royal patronage following the Gupta era and the resurgence of devotional Hindu movements, began to decline. The trade routes that had facilitated its expansion also allowed it to flourish in other parts of Asia, leaving a legacy that, while enduring in the world, was overshadowed in India by the evolution of Hinduism itself. In this context, the enigma surrounding Buddhism and Jainism in India raises intriguing questions about their legacy. What elements of their philosophy survived integrated into Hindu culture? What lessons can we learn from their rise and decline? And above all, what mysteries await at the intersection of these ancient spiritual traditions? As we delve into the next chapter, the history of India will become more tumultuous. The invasions of the Huns will mark a drastic change in the political and social landscape of northern India, testing the resilience of the cultures that Buddhism and Jainism had helped to forge. How would these cultures respond to the new threat? The answer will be revealed in the next chapter. This era of splendor and reflection in northern India, marked by the cultural and political legacy of the Gupta dynasty, was about to face a trial by fire. On the horizon, a growing shadow loomed over the fertile lands of the Ganges and Yamuna rivers. The invasions of the White Huns, a nomadic and warrior people, would not only unleash destruction, but also accelerate a fragmentation of power that would change the course of Indian history. The White Huns, known in sources as the Hephthalites or Huns, emerged from the steppes of Central Asia, a vast territory that had been a melting pot of cultures and civilizations. This people, in search of new lands and resources, began to move southward, crossing the formidable mountains of the Hindu Kush. Around the 5th century after Christ, their incursions began to resonate strongly in the northwestern regions of India, where the Gupta Empire, although still powerful, showed signs of weakening. The political environment in northern India was complex. The Gupta dynasty, under emperors such as Kumaragupta I, had consolidated a vast empire that encompassed much of the subcontinent. Cities flourished, the arts and sciences thrived, and trade expanded. However, this stability was fragile. The central power of the Guptas relied on a network of alliances with local kingdoms and regional leaders, who, although loyal, were also ambitious and prone to rebellion. As the Huns began their advance, tensions escalated. The response of the Guptas was crucial. Emperors like Skandagupta managed to repel the initial waves of invaders, achieving significant victories that temporarily preserved the empire. However, the speed and ferocity of the Hunnic attacks were relentless. The Gupta elite was forced to make decisions that would change the course of history. The constant mobilization of armies drained the imperial treasury, and what seemed to be a unified response soon became undermined by disorganization and distrust. Internal disputes among military leaders and nobles accentuated the fragmentation of power. The Hunnic incursions began to dismantle prosperous cities, leaving in their wake a trail of chaos and destruction. The ancient trade routes that had been the lifeblood of the Gupta Empire were disrupted, and the economy, which had flourished due to exchange, fell into a state of crisis. The Huns, shrewd in their strategy, not only plundered but also politically infiltrated, establishing alliances with some of the kingdoms that had previously been tributaries of the Guptas, further weakening central authority. Among the Hunnic leaders, two of the most notorious were Toramana and his son Mihirakula. Toramana managed to establish a kingdom in northern India, and his name became synonymous with conquest. But it was Mihirakula who earned a reputation for cruelty, and his reign is remembered as a period of persecution and destruction, especially against Buddhist centers. The enigma behind these figures is whether they were merely barbaric conquerors, or if they had a more complex political agenda to establish a new order on the subcontinent. The battles fought during this time were not only physical confrontations, they were also cultural clashes. The arrival of the Huns not only challenged the political order but also questioned the beliefs and values that had sustained Indian civilization up to that point. The Huns, in their quest for conquest, became a symbol of the fragility of power and how even the greatest civilizations could be dismantled by external forces. The fragmentation of power in northern India, exacerbated by the Hunnic invasions, left a political vacuum that was soon filled by new actors. Local kingdoms, which had previously been subordinate to the authority of the Guptas, began to claim their independence, fighting for control of the lands that had once been part of a unified empire. Dynasties such as the Mitrakas in the west and the Maukharis in the north emerged as new contenders, each with their own ambitions and visions for the region. The immediate consequences of these invasions were devastating. The fall of the Gupta dynasty marked the end of a golden age, and northern India plunged into a period of political fragmentation and economic decline. The population, which had enjoyed a long period of stability, found itself amidst chaos. The cities that had once been centers of learning and culture suffered severe damage, and the accumulated knowledge over centuries was threatened. But the enigma persists. Could there have been a more effective form of resistance against the Hunnic threat? Or were the Guptas doomed to succumb to a force that, although brutal, also brought with it an inevitable transformation? History does not offer simple answers, and the echo of these questions still resonates in the lands that were once the vibrant heart of the subcontinent. In the shadows of this tumultuous period, the legacy of the Guptas faded, but the seeds of new cultures and civilizations began to germinate. As the horizon darkened with the shadows of invasions, another chapter of Indian history was about to begin. This time in the south, the arrival of new influences would bring changes that would transform not only politics but also religion and cultural identity in the region. The story of India would continue its journey. And after the fragmentation caused by the Huns, a dynasty would emerge that would change the course of Indian history, the Chola. This crisis in the north would soon contrast with an opportunity for expansion and greatness in the south. In the heart of the Indian peninsula, in the region of Tamil Nadu, a force was emerging that would change not only the political landscape, but also the cultural and economic fabric of the time. The Chola dynasty. Known for their naval prowess and patronage of the arts, the Chola would become masters of maritime trade and cultural influence, extending their legacy far beyond the Indian coasts. The historical context surrounding the medieval Chola is characterized by a period of fragmentation and rivalry in the subcontinent. In the 9th century, southern India was marked by the existence of various kingdoms, each struggling for control. While the north faced the aftermath of invasions, the south presented a different panorama, where dynasties such as the Pallava and the Pandya competed for dominance over the region. Amidst this turbulence, the Chola, under the leadership of visionary emperors like Vijayalaya, Aditya I, and later Rajaraja Chola I, began to forge their path toward greatness. Rajaraja Chola I, a name that resonates like an echo in history, was the architect of Chola expansion. His reign, which spanned from 985 to 1014 after Christ, was marked by a series of strategic decisions that would transform the dynasty into a maritime power. The construction of a formidable fleet and the consolidation of internal political power were just the beginning. Rajaraja Chola I launched military campaigns that unified southern India and extended to Sri Lanka, a bold move that would open a new era of cultural and commercial influence. The motivation behind this ambition remains a topic of debate among historians. Alongside his son Rajendra Chola I, who would inherit his father's legacy, the Chola dynasty not only focused on territorial conquest but also established trade routes that would connect the coasts of India with the islands of Southeast Asia. The Malacca Peninsula, Sumatra and Java became hubs of trade where Indian goods, from spices to textiles, were highly valued. The expansion was not only military, it was above all cultural. The Chola brought with them not only their goods but also their art, religion, and traditions, leaving an indelible mark on the lands with which they traded and interacted. The development of these events was marked by significant encounters. In the early 11th century, the powerful maritime empire of Srivijaya, centered in Sumatra, controlled the Strait of Malacca and represented an obstacle to Chola commercial ambitions. Rajendra Chola I launched an unprecedented naval expedition against Srivijaya, achieving a victory that secured Chola control over the maritime routes of the Indian Ocean. The Chola fleets, under the command of shrewd commanders, not only challenged their rivals but established a maritime hegemony that would characterize the dynasty. The mystery behind this meteoric rise continues to fascinate scholars. As the Chola expanded their influence, they also cultivated diplomatic relations with other powers of the time, including the China of the Song dynasty. By sending embassies and establishing trade ties, the Chola ensured that their influence was not limited to warfare but also extended to diplomacy and culture. This multifaceted approach allowed their cultural legacy to take root in Southeast Asia. Chola influences can be observed in the architecture, sculpture, and religion of these regions, where temples with their distinctive architectural style still stand as silent witnesses to the splendor of an era. However, the immediate impact of Chola expansion was as profound as it was complex. The wealth accumulated through trade and conquest brought not only prosperity but also internal tensions. The administration of a vast empire required a delicate balance between central power and the conquered regions. As Chola control solidified, challenges arose that threatened internal stability. Local elites and vassal kingdoms, sometimes resentful of Chola authority, began to question the emperor's power. Could this empire, forged in ambition and conquest, withstand the tests of time? The enigma of this chapter centers on the duality of Chola greatness. Their maritime and cultural expansion, while admirable, also sowed the seeds of discord. The history of the Chola dynasty raises an intriguing question. Was their ambition a catalyst for their success, or the root of their eventual decline? As the dynasty faced internal challenges and the resurgence of their rivals, the echo of their legacy continued to resonate in the history of Southeast Asia. As we delve into the next chapter, we will explore the impact of a new, profound change that would transform the region forever. The arrival of Islam in India. The question that arises is how the wealth and cultural diversity of India, exemplified by kingdoms such as that of the Chola, influenced the perception and interaction with this new force on the horizon. The history of India continues to unfold before us, revealing secrets that still await unraveling. This was an era marked by transformation and change, where the echoes of the past still resonated in the hearts of the peoples of the Indian subcontinent. The vigorous legacy of the indigenous dynasties began to be challenged by external forces, whose shadows approached stealthily. Islam, a faith that had emerged on the Arabian Peninsula, started to spread beyond its borders, bringing with it a message that united the masses under a new conception of God. The arrival of Islam in India, through merchants and later conquerors starting in the 8th century, would not only alter the religious landscape but also redefine the political and social structure of the region. The incursions of Mahmud of Ghazni, a Turkish sultan who ruled from the heart of what is now Afghanistan, marked a decisive chapter in the early 11th century. In a context where India possessed vast wealth, both in resources and culture, Ghazni saw the opportunity to consolidate his power and finance his empire. His ambition led him to conduct multiple expeditions between the years 1000 and 1027, plundering cities and temples, accumulating treasures that allowed him to strengthen his reign. Historians debate the motivations of this conqueror. Was it primarily the thirst for gold or a desire to propagate his faith by force? As Mahmud advanced, his figure became increasingly controversial. In his first significant attack in 1001, his troops defeated the Hindu king Jayapala near Peshawar. This first large-scale military contact between the Central Asian Islamic world and the Indian subcontinent revealed not only Ghaznī's military prowess, but also the vulnerability of the Indian kingdoms, which were often divided and weakened by internal struggles. The Hindu kingdoms, although rich in culture and tradition, were unprepared to face such a determined and organized enemy. The arrival of Islam was not merely a military invasion. It was an encounter of civilizations, although often marked by violence. Mahmud, after plundering temples such as that of Somnath in Gujarat, returned to his land with enormous wealth, but he also left a legacy of resentment. Mahmud's actions, particularly his attacks on Hindu sacred sites, left a deep scar in the collective memory of the region, an echo of a time of invasion and resistance that would be evoked in centuries to come. However, history did not stop with Mahmud's expeditions. Over time, the seeds of Islamic influence germinated in Indian soil, and by the late 12th century, the foundations of the Sultanate of Delhi began to consolidate. This new political order was the result of a series of invasions led by Muhammad of Ghur, but also of a complex network of alliances and conflicts that facilitated the arrival of new dynasties. As the sultans of Delhi, such as Qutb al-Din Aibak and his successor Iltutmish, established their rule, India began to experience a profound change in its identity. The key decisions of these leaders focused not only on military conquest but also on administration. Iltutmish, in particular, was astute in integrating some local elites into his government, forming a hybrid system that mixed Turkic Persian and Indian elements. This fusion, however, was not without tensions. The sultans, in seeking legitimacy for their reign, faced the challenge of how to govern a territory with a predominantly non-Muslim population, which often resisted the imposition of new laws and customs. The unfolding of events during this time was a labyrinth of political intrigues, strategic alliances and revolts. The construction of monuments such as the famous Qutb Minar complex in Delhi symbolized not only the power of the new rulers, but also the beginning of a new architectural synthesis. The era of the Sultanate of Delhi was, in many ways, a period of introspection and transformation. The intersection between Islam and Hinduism began to shape a new cultural reality, where the boundaries between both traditions blurred in some aspects. Although political and religious tensions were palpable, the immediate consequences of these events were profound. The arrival of Islam brought not only a religious change but also an impact on the economy and society. Trade routes expanded, and India became more closely connected with the Islamic world, creating a cultural exchange that enriched both sides in areas such as science, art, and literature. However, this period was also marked by violence and resistance. The battles between the sultans and the Hindu kingdoms left a trail of destruction, and the memory of these conflicts still resonates in current historical narratives. Despite the changes, certain enigmas remained unresolved. To what extent was the arrival of Islam a catalyst for cultural diversity or a source of deeper divisions? The answers to these questions lie in the shadows of history, where the echoes of the decisions of past leaders still whisper in the ears of present generations. As India ventured into this new chapter, the consolidation of the Sultanate of Delhi promised a future filled with challenges and opportunities. The history of India would not stop here. It was preparing for a new turn, one that would lead to the formation of an even larger and more powerful empire. In the next chapter, we will explore how the Sultanate of Delhi was established, its administration and its impact on Indian culture, revealing the secrets that still lie in the ruins of a glorious past. This instability would soon transform into a new order. In the lands of India, the echo of Muslim invasions resonated strongly, giving way to an era of profound and lasting changes. Starting in the 13th century, the foundation of the Sultanate of Delhi would mark a turning point in the history of the peninsula, a period that would not only alter the political structure of the region but also leave an indelible mark on its culture. The historical context preceding the formation of the Sultanate of Delhi was a mosaic of constantly changing kingdoms, Following the fragmentation of the Gupta Empire and the invasions of the Huns, northern India was divided. The invasion of Mahmud of Ghazni in the early 11th century further destabilized the region. Yet, in the shadow of these incursions, a new power was emerging that would soon shape the destiny of India. The Sultanate of Delhi, established by the successors of Muhammad of Ghur. The key figures of this chapter are emblematic individuals who, through their bold decisions, would sculpt the future of the region. The first of them is Qutb al-Din Aybak, a general of Turkic origin who would become the first Sultan of Delhi. His rise to power in the year 1206 was not merely a matter of fortune, but the result of shrewd political and military maneuvers in the face of the fragmentation of Hindu kingdoms. Aybak, after the death of his patron Muhammad of Ghur, consolidated his control in Delhi, thus establishing the first lasting Muslim sultanate in India. His legacy is not limited to politics. Aybak is also known for initiating the construction of monuments, such as the Qutb Minar, which still stands as a silent witness to history. As the Sultanate of Delhi consolidated, other leaders such as Iltutmish and Razia Sultana would also play crucial roles. Iltutmish, Aybak's successor, is remembered for his expansionist policies, the modernization of the army, and the establishment of a centralized administrative system. Razia, his daughter and the only woman to occupy the throne of Delhi, challenged the gender conventions of her time, although her reign would be brief and tragic, marked by the resistance of the male nobility. Historians wonder what secrets these power struggles concealed in a world dominated by men, and whether their downfall was a reflection of the fragility of power in a transforming society. The development of events leading to the establishment of the Sultanate of Delhi was characterized by a series of conquests and confrontations. Since the year 1206, the expansion of the Sultanate was relentless. Military campaigns against Hindu kingdoms such as those of the Rajputs followed one another with astonishing speed. Muhammad of Ghur's victory in the Second Battle of Tarain in the year 1192, where he defeated Prithviraj Chauhan, laid the groundwork for the subsequent creation of an empire that would extend across northern India. However, these victories were not achieved without a high cost, and the resistance of local forces was a constant. The administration of the Sultanate of Delhi was a complex web where the sultans had to balance governance and coexistence with diverse communities. They implemented a tax system that, while effective for the state, often generated discontent among non-Muslim subjects. The system of jizya, a tax on non-Muslim populations, became a point of controversy, creating tensions that would endure over time. Despite this, the sultans also promoted an environment of cultural exchange where architecture, literature, and the arts flourished. Persian influence became evident in the poetry and architecture of the time, while local culture also left its mark on administrative practices and daily life. The immediate consequences of the establishment of the Sultanate of Delhi extended beyond politics. The establishment of a Muslim government in the heart of India meant the arrival of new ideas, customs, and forms of art. The interaction between Muslims and Hindus gave rise to a cultural syncretism that would manifest in music, architecture, and literature, sowing the seeds of what would later be known as Indo-Islamic culture. Nevertheless, this cultural fusion also posed a puzzle. Could religious diversity truly coexist in a context where political tensions were palpable? The legacy of the Sultanate of Delhi is undoubtedly a testament to the power of resistance and adaptation, but it also leaves unanswered questions. As the Sultanate consolidated, was it truly prepared to face the challenges that lay ahead? The fragmentation of power and internal struggles within its own nobility foreshadowed an uncertain future, and so the Sultanate of Delhi, which emerged as a beacon of Muslim power in India, found itself at the crossroads between glory and decline. As the shadows of the past loom over the future, history does not stand still. The arrival of new leaders and the expansion of Muslim power in India would not only shape the politics of the region but also lay the foundations for the creation of one of the grandest empires in history, the Mughal Empire. what transformations awaited on the horizon. Thus, history invites us to continue exploring the paths that, over the centuries, have led India toward its destiny. This instability would soon give way to the forging of a new destiny in the Indian subcontinent. By the end of the 15th century and the beginning of the 16th, a distant echo began to resonate in the lands that once saw the great empires shine. An imminent change was brewing in the shadows, and amidst whispers of war and promises of glory, the Mughal Empire emerged as a fascinating enigma in the history of India. The historical context preceding the foundation of the Mughal Empire is marked by the political and social fragmentation of the subcontinent. The decline of the Sultanate of Delhi, weakened by internal struggles and succession wars, had left a power vacuum. This instability provided the perfect backdrop for ambitious leaders to seek to consolidate their domains. In this context, Babur, a descendant of the Turco-Mongol conqueror Timur on his father's side and of Genghis Khan on his mother's side, found himself in the lands of Central Asia dreaming of an empire. The question historians ask is what motivated Babur to cross the mountains of the Hindu Kush, defying the dangers of an uncertain journey. In 1526, after being rejected in his attempts to reclaim the territories of his ancestors in Samarkand, Babur turned his gaze towards the Indian subcontinent. With a relatively small but bold and well-trained army, he decided to take advantage of the weakening of the Sultanate of Delhi. The decisive Battle of Panipat, fought on the 20th of April in 1526, became the turning point that would change the course of history. Babur, with his military cunning, utilized innovation on the battlefield, including field artillery, an element that his adversaries underestimated. Sultan Ibrahim Lodi, relying on his numerical superiority, was defeated, and with his fall, Babur proclaimed himself conqueror of Delhi, marking the beginning of the Mughal Empire. However, victory did not come without sacrifices. Babur faced resistance from the Rajput confederations and Afghan tribes that still fought for their autonomy. His reign was a combination of military conquests and the establishment of an administration that sought to integrate the diverse cultures of the region. Through alliances and a demonstration of strength, Babur laid the foundations of an empire that would expand remarkably. But could he truly unify such a diverse and conflicted territory? The story of Mughal expansion would solidify under the leadership of his grandson, Akbar the Great. Born in 1542, Akbar ascended to the throne at a time of instability following the death of his father, Humayun. His youth was not an obstacle, but a challenge that propelled him to forge his own destiny. Unlike his predecessors, Akbar understood that the success of his empire depended on the integration of the diverse communities that inhabited it. With a policy of religious tolerance and the promotion of interreligious dialogue, Akbar sought to build bridges between Hindus and Muslims. Akbar's administration was characterized by reforms that strengthened the bureaucracy and increased tax revenue. He implemented the Mansabdari system, which organized the nobles and officials of the empire, and the Zapt revenue system, which allowed for better land management and more equitable taxation. However, his legacy was not limited to administration. Akbar was also a great patron of the arts and culture. At his court, poets, artists, and philosophers flourished, contributing to the development of an artistic style that fused Persian and Indian elements. Historians debate whether culture was sufficient to maintain cohesion in such a vast and diverse empire. As the Mughal Empire expanded, the challenge of governing such a diverse territory became more complex. Akbar's military campaigns, which included the conquest of Gujarat and Bengal, led to increased resistance among some local elites. The integration of cultures and religions was not always a peaceful process, and tensions began to arise. Akbar, aware of these challenges, implemented policies aimed at inclusion, but the shadow of discontent always loomed. Could an empire built on tolerance truly sustain itself in the face of adversity? The impact of these events was profound. The Mughal Empire not only expanded territorially but also left a mark on the cultural identity of India. The synergy of traditions and beliefs gave rise to a legacy that would endure over time. but it also sowed the seeds of future divisions. As the paths of Babur and Akbar intertwined, the enigma of their success manifested in an empire that shone with splendor but also faced the echoes of discord. Thus, the birth of the Mughal Empire leaves us with an intriguing question. Was integration and dialogue truly the key to its success, or was it merely a veil that concealed latent tensions? The history of the Mughal Empire, from its beginnings to its development, serves as a reminder that power and culture can intertwine in complex ways, leaving a legacy that continues to resonate in modern India as the shadow of the Mughal rises over history. A new chapter awaits us, where Akbar's policies will shape an empire in full bloom. How will the emperor handle the tensions that lie ahead? History is about to reveal it. That expansion of the Mughal Empire, initiated by Babur, would soon be nuanced by a ruler who would redefine not only the borders, but also the very fabric of Indian society. Akbar, known as Akbar the Great, was not just an emperor, he was a visionary whose reign, which lasted from 1556 to 1605, would be remembered as a time of cultural and administrative splendor. His ascent to the throne occurred amidst a context of instability, where India was permeated by sectarian tensions and power struggles. In this environment, the figure of Akbar emerged as a beacon of change, willing to challenge the shadows of sectarianism and discord. As Akbar assumed power, he inherited an empire marked by religious division and rivalries between Hindus and Muslims. The policies of some rulers of the Delhi Sultanate had left a deep imprint, fostering resentments that threatened to fracture the delicate balance of society. However, Akbar, with his astute understanding of the complexity of the subcontinent, set out to unite his people through a series of innovative policies of religious tolerance that resonate strongly in history. One of Akbar's most significant decisions was the abolition of the jizya, the tax that non-Muslims were required to pay. This measure, along with his marriage to Hindu Rajput princesses, sent a powerful message of inclusion. He promoted the concept of Sulikul, or universal peace, and in his court, in the Ibadat Khana, or house of worship, he organized debates among theologians of various faiths, Muslims, Hindus, Jains, Parsis, and even Christian Jesuits. From these dialogues emerged his idea of Dini Ilahi, or divine religion, a syncretic ethical system that sought to take the best from each religion. Historians debate whether this was an attempt to create a new faith, or simply a policy to unify the elite of his empire. Alongside his religious policies, Akbar implemented a series of administrative reforms that transformed the governance of the empire. The creation of a more equitable tax system and the introduction of a census for better fiscal planning were some of the changes implemented by his council, which included key figures such as the Rajput noble Raja Todarmal, his finance minister, and his closest advisor, the scholar Abul Fazl ibn Mubarak. These men, alongside Akbar, embarked on a journey of modernization that would lay the foundations for a more efficient and just administration. However, as these changes took shape, a persistent question arose. At what cost was this unity and modernization achieved? The development of a more inclusive bureaucracy, which allowed the entry of nobles from different backgrounds into the Mansabdari system, contributed to a broader sense of belonging among the various ethnic and religious groups. Nevertheless, the shadow of distrust was never far away. The reforms, although successful in many aspects, were often met with skepticism by those who feared losing power and privileges. The story of Akbar is a tapestry of alliances and betrayals, where each decision was a step in a delicate game of power. The most notable events of his reign, such as the conquest of Malwa and Gujarat, and the establishment of diplomatic relations with neighboring empires, were witnesses to his ambition to expand and consolidate his influence. The victory over the fort of Chittagong and the subsequent integration of the Rajputs into his empire were crucial steps in his policy of inclusion. However, each battle won brought with it a new set of challenges. The question that arises is whether Akbar could truly maintain peace in such a diverse and often fractured empire. As Akbar's legacy was forged, the consequences of his policies began to become evident. The openness to interreligious dialogue and the promotion of a more secular state were pioneering for his time, but the immediate impact was mixed. While some hailed the peace and prosperity, others saw in his measures an erosion of the traditions and beliefs that had endured for centuries. Akbar left an indelible mark, but the debate over whether this imprint was entirely positive or negative for the future of India continues. The enigma of Akbar's reign lies in his ability to navigate a diverse and complex empire while attempting to be a unifier in a time of fragmentation. His policies of religious tolerance and administrative reforms not only redefined the role of the ruler in India, but also left unanswered questions about the nature of power and coexistence. Did Akbar manage to transcend the divisions of his time, or were his efforts merely a fleeting echo in the vast history of India? Thus, as we delve into the splendor and decline that would characterize the Mughal Empire, we cannot forget that Akbar's legacy is a reminder of the possibilities and dangers that arise when attempting to forge unity in diversity. His story leads us to a chapter where greatness meets decline, the zenith and the shadow of the Mughal Empire under his successors. What secrets still awaited in the depths of this era? This was the era of greatness, a moment when the echoes of an empire resonated with the majesty of its achievements. Following the flourishing of the era of Akbar, the Mughal Empire would reach its cultural and architectural pinnacle under the reign of Shah Jahan, who upon ascending the throne in 1628 aimed to leave an indelible mark on history. However, in the shadows of this splendor, the seeds of a decline that would shape the future of the subcontinent began to take root. The historical context of this period is imbued with contrasts. While art, architecture, and culture thrived, politics became increasingly complex. The empire, which had expanded significantly, encompassed vast regions of India, each with its own diversity. This presented both opportunities and challenges. Tensions between different religious groups and factions at court began to stir, and the legacy of tolerance that had characterized Akbar was threatened by a change in leadership. In this scenario, Shah Jahan stood out not only as a leader but as a visionary builder. His reign was a period of extraordinary cultural development, where architecture reached new heights. The Taj Mahal, a mausoleum erected in memory of his beloved wife Mumtaz Mahal, became a symbol of Mughal art and love. Each polished marble, each intricate engraving told a story of devotion and ambition. This monument not only represented the architectural mastery of its time, but also the zenith of Mughal power, whose influence extended throughout the subcontinent. Simultaneously, the emperor surrounded himself with artists, poets, and philosophers, creating an environment where culture flourished. The courts of Shah Jahan were a hotbed of creativity and scholarship. However, in this fertile ground of splendor, the decisions of one man began to chart the course of an empire approaching its twilight. The construction of grand monuments like the Taj Mahal and the new capital, Mahajanapadas in Delhi, demanded enormous resources, unleashing economic tensions that, while initially seemed manageable, would begin to have a domino effect on the stability of the empire. As the glory of Shah Jahan solidified, the rise of his son Aurangzeb posed a conundrum. Aurangzeb, who ascended the throne in 1658 after a brutal succession war against his brothers, was a strong-willed leader and a devout Muslim. His approach to religious politics contrasted sharply with that of his predecessors. While Shah Jahan and Akbar had promoted a policy of tolerance, Aurangzeb adopted a more orthodox stance, reinstating the tax on non-Muslims and ordering the destruction of some Hindu temples. Historians wonder why an emperor of such power chose a path that would alienate a large part of his population and lead to the fragmentation of his empire. The development of these events intertwines with the fate of the Mughal Empire. Aurangzeb, in consolidating his power, was forced to confront a series of revolts in regions such as Maratha and Punjab. The Maratha warriors, led by the charismatic Shivaji, emerged as a formidable force against Mughal authority, employing guerrilla tactics that wore down the imperial army. The resistance not only challenged Aurangzeb's authority, but also revealed the growing dissatisfaction among the various groups that made up the empire. War, intolerance, and oppression began to leave their mark, eroding the cohesion that had characterized the Mughals. The immediate consequences of these decisions were devastating. The unity of the empire fragmented, and social tensions intensified. Nobles and local leaders, once loyal to the crown, began to act with greater autonomy. The economy, which had flourished at its peak, began to falter due to the costs of Aurangzeb's endless military campaigns in the Deccan and the management of a vast territory. Court intrigues multiplied, and the struggle for power became the norm in the Mughal court following his death in 1707. The enigma that looms over this chapter of Mughal history is profound and unsettling. While the greatness of architecture and culture reached its peak, what shadows accumulated in the decisions of its leaders? Could the zenith of an empire, in fact, be the prelude to its own downfall? The history of India teaches us that even the most powerful kingdoms can be swept away by their own ambition and the consequences of their policies. As the 18th century progressed, Mughal greatness began to fade, giving way to a new chapter where external and internal forces intertwined in an even greater enigma: the arrival of Europeans and the transformation of India under their influence. In this context of change, the history of the Mughal Empire becomes a distant echo of a time of splendor, a reminder that glory, though brilliant, can be fleeting. If you're enjoying the video, give it a like and subscribe to see more content from the channel. This was a time of silent transformation, where the vast Indian subcontinent, rich in history and wealth, began to feel the echo of distant footsteps. The winds of change blew gently over its shores, bringing with them the promise of new worlds and the shadow of European ambition. As the Indian kingdoms recovered from internal turmoil and Mughal power declined, a new chapter was about to unfold: the arrival of European merchants. In the 15th century, Europe was a continent in search of new trade routes. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 had made access to land routes to Asia difficult. The stories of spices, silks, and other treasures from the East were a whisper that awakened the greed of princes and merchants alike. Portugal, under the leadership of figures such as Prince Henry the Navigator, had begun to chart the seas of Africa. But it was the desire to find a direct maritime route to India that would drive Europeans to cross unknown oceans. The first Portuguese expeditions, led by Vasco da Gama in 1498, would mark a monumental milestone. Da Gama, sailing around the Cape of Good Hope, not only reached the Indian coasts but also opened a new chapter in the history of intercontinental trade. Upon arriving in Calicut, on the Malabar coast, he encountered a vibrant world where the spice trade dominated the economic landscape. However, the encounter was not merely one of commercial exchange, it was a clash of cultures where two worlds collided in a complex game of interests and conflicts. The decisions of Da Gama and his successors were not mere anecdotes of exploration, they were deliberate acts that triggered a series of events that would forever change the dynamics of power in the region. The arrival of Europeans not only introduced new goods, but also new military technologies and, unfortunately, new forms of control. On the Indian coasts, Portuguese merchants established a system of fortified enclaves, where forts and trading posts emerged as shadows of an empire that was beginning to extend. Over the following decades, the echo of Portuguese actions would resonate in the ears of other European empires. Countries such as the Netherlands, England, and France, seeing the success of the Portuguese, quickly joined this race for control of trade routes. In 1600, the British East India Company was founded, a milestone that would mark the beginning of fierce competition for control of trade in India. The arrival of these new actors brought with it a series of decisions that would alter the narrative of the region. In an environment already tense due to the political and economic rivalry among the Indian states that succeeded the Mughal Empire, the arrival of Europeans would further complicate the situation. Local elites, already divided by internal rivalries, faced the tempting possibility of allying with these new powers to gain an advantage over their rivals. Thus, Indian politics became a chessboard where the decisions of a few could alter the fate of many. However, the establishment of European trading settlements was not a peaceful process. Conflicts with local rulers were inevitable. In 1612, the British East India Company achieved a significant naval victory over the Portuguese at the Battle of Swali, near Surat. This event not only symbolized the struggle for commercial control, but also secured the favor of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, allowing the British to establish their first factory in Surat. The immediate consequences of the arrival of Europeans in India were profound. European merchants, by settling in strategic ports such as Surat, Madras and Calcutta, began to alter traditional trade routes, introducing a constant flow of goods that would transform the local economy. Spices, tea and textiles became highly demanded items in Europe, but at what cost? This new flow of wealth also brought with it the exploitation of local resources and the establishment of monopolies that, in the long run, would affect the indigenous economy. The arrival of Europeans not only marked a change in the economy, but also left a riddle that endures to this day. How could a small group of European trading companies come to influence a vast and diverse continent like India? What secrets and cultural legacies were hidden behind this transformation? These encounters were not merely the beginning of an era of trade, but the shadow of a control that loomed over the lands of the ancient kingdoms. This chapter of Indian history, where ambition, trade and culture intertwine, lays the groundwork for understanding the rise of the British East India Company. A chapter that leads us to delve into the complex web of alliances and conflicts that would define the future of the subcontinent. The next stage of this narrative will reveal how this mercantile entity would become a formidable political power that would change the destiny of India forever. The arrival of Europeans and their establishment in India not only marked a new chapter in the history of the subcontinent, but also laid the groundwork for the emergence of one of the most controversial and powerful entities of the time, the British East India Company. In a context where the wealth of spices, tea and cotton attracted merchants from around the world, the company emerged as a key player, weaving itself into the complex tapestry of politics and economics of the subcontinent. By the end of the 16th century and the beginning of the 17th, India was in a state of political fragmentation. Regional empires, including the Mughals in their phase of decline, faced internal and external challenges. The arrival of Europeans, initially as traders, began to alter the existing balance of power. The British East India Company was established in 1600 with the intention of capitalizing on commercial opportunities. However, its evolution from a simple trading group to a significant political force was a gradual process, driven by ingenuity, ambition, and often violence. The rise of the company would not have been possible without the figure of key individuals such as Robert Clive, a young officer who became the architect of British expansion in India. Clive, with his cunning and audacity, played a crucial role in the Battle of Plassey in 1757. There, through a combination of bribery, conspiracy, and a small military force, he achieved a decisive victory over the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dowlah. This victory not only allowed the company to consolidate its control over the wealthy province of Bengal, but also marked the beginning of effective British rule in India. The decisions of Clive and other leaders of the company were driven by the desire for wealth and power, leaving in their wake a trail of conflicts and shifting alliances. As the British East India Company consolidated its power, the shadow of its influence rapidly spread across the subcontinent. The victory at Plassey was just the first step. Years of territorial and political expansion followed. In 1764, the company defeated the combined forces of the Mughal Emperor, the Nawab of Awadh, and the Nawab of Bengal at the Battle of Buxar, thereby securing even greater authority in the region. The British, now in control of vast territories, began to impose their administration. establishing a tax collection system that would transform local economic structures. However, the company did not only focus on economic expansion, but also sought to exert political control through diplomacy and manipulation. The company used its influence to destabilize local leaders and keep princes in a state of dependency through subsidiary alliances. This divide and conquer strategy allowed them to consolidate their power without the need for a constant military presence. The creation of a private army, largely composed of Indian soldiers, sepoys, under the command of British officers, enabled them to maintain control over a vast and diverse territory. The impact of the company's growing influence was profound and multifaceted. Local traditions, governance systems, and social structures began to crumble under the weight of British rule. The economy of India, which had previously focused on local production and regional trade, transformed into an export-oriented economy driven by the interests of the company. Cultivated lands were used to produce cash crops such as opium and indigo instead of food crops, which, according to some historians, contributed to a series of famines and widespread suffering among the local population. Moreover, the British presence began to introduce changes in culture and education. The ideas of the Enlightenment and colonial thought intertwined, giving rise to a new social order where Western education spread among Indian elites, generating a complex relationship of admiration and rejection towards British culture. However, this change was not uniform. It provoked tensions and divisions that would manifest in the future. As the British East India Company asserted itself as a political and economic power, a troubling question arises. To what extent did the company's pursuit of wealth and power justify the tactics used to achieve it? Historians debate whether the British were the sole architects of their destiny, or if historical circumstances and the political fragmentation of India offered them an opportunity they could not refuse. The history of the company is not merely a tale of expansion, but a puzzle that reveals the complexity of power relations, ambition, and the consequences of human decisions. As the echo of their actions resonates through time, the chapter of the British East India Company invites us to reflect on the legacy of its rule. The shadow of the company would lengthen, inexorably leading to a rebellion that would change the face of India forever. The rebellion of 1857 was brewing on the horizon, a culmination of discontent that would soon erupt into a struggle for freedom and identity. That shadow of dissatisfaction and discontent that had begun to grow under the control of the British East India Company would soon manifest itself in an explosion of resistance. In 1857, after years of exploitation and humiliation, India would be engulfed in a monumental uprising known today as the Revolt of 1857. This episode, sometimes referred to as the First War of Indian Independence, was not only a cry for freedom, but also a puzzle that would unravel the existing tensions between the colonizers and the colonized, revealing a legacy of struggles, betrayals, and longings for sovereignty. The historical context that preceded this revolt was framed in a deeply transformed India under the influence of the company. Since its arrival in the 17th century, this entity had woven a trade network that quickly became a dominant political power. Economic reforms and land administration policies such as the doctrine of lapse, which allowed for the annexation of princely states, had destabilized traditional social structures, generating a growing resentment. The introduction of new technologies, along with a series of laws that stripped nobles and landowners of their power, created an atmosphere of tension. Discontent spread from the soldiers, known as sepoys, to the peasants and local elites. Among the protagonists of this uprising, the sepoy Mangal Pandey emerges as an emblematic figure. On the 29th of March in 1857, at the Barrackpore garrison, Pandey rose against his British superiors. His act of defiance was the echo of a deeper discontent. The introduction of new cartridges for the Enfield rifle, which were rumoured to be greased with pig and cow fat, was the spark that ignited the fuse. This fact deeply offended the religious beliefs of Hindu and Muslim soldiers, and although the British denied the rumour, the damage was already done. With the revolt already underway, Other leaders would rise on the horizon, figures such as the elderly Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar, the brave Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi, Nana Sahib and Begum Hazrat Mahal of Awadh became symbols of resistance. Each of them, guided by a sense of justice and the desire to reclaim lost sovereignty, would make crucial decisions that would define the course of the uprising. Decisions that sought not only the liberation of their territories, but ultimately questioned the very colonial order. As the uprising spread, the cities of Meerut, Delhi and Kanpur became focal points of resistance. In Delhi, the rebellious sepoys proclaimed Bahadur Shah Zafar as their leader, hoping that his figure would restore the old order. The streets resonated with the clamour of a people uniting for the first time in decades against a common enemy. However, the unfolding of events was not a straight path. Internal disputes among different factions, the lack of a unified strategy, and the brutal response of British forces began to blur the hopes of victory. The British intervention was fierce. The company, shocked by the magnitude of the insurrection, mobilized troops from various parts of the empire. The result was a bloody repression. Delhi was besieged and finally captured in September of 1857. The massacre of Kanpur, where British prisoners were killed, was followed by equally brutal reprisals by the British against the Indian population. The echo of the rebellion spread, but the immediate consequences were devastating for many of its protagonists. The uprising was finally crushed in 1858, but it left an indelible mark on the history of India. The East India Company was dissolved, and control of the subcontinent passed directly into the hands of the British Crown, marking the beginning of the British Raj. However, the legacy of the revolt of 1857 was not limited to a change of power. The seeds of modern Indian nationalism began to germinate among the ruins of the insurrection. The struggle for freedom had begun. But the enigma left by the rebellion is whether it achieved its goal of liberating India or if it was an echo of an even greater dream waiting for its time. The revolt of 1857 is a complex event. Its causes, its protagonists, and its aftermath reveal a conflict that was not only physical but also symbolic, a struggle between the old world and the new. The resistance of 1857 confronts us with questions that still resonate. What does freedom truly mean? Can the past shape our future? This chapter of Indian history can only be fully understood by exploring its consequences and the evolution of a nationalist movement that would begin to flourish in the following decades. As we delve into the next chapter, the British Raj, we find ourselves at a turning point. The resistance had been stifled, but the spirit of struggle endured. How would the Indians respond to this new phase of control? The answers to these questions will take us to the heart of a new chapter in the history of India. This crisis would soon trigger a monumental change. In 1858, following the Sepoy Rebellion, the British East India Company was dissolved and its control over the vast and enigmatic land of India passed directly to the Crown, marking the beginning of the British Raj. This period, which would extend until 1947, would stand as a decisive chapter in the history of the subcontinent, laden with political, social, and cultural tensions that still resonate in the collective memory of its inhabitants. The historical context surrounding this transfer of power is complex. By the mid-19th century, India was divided into territories under the mandate of the company and hundreds of princely states. Discontent had been building, fueled by policies that stripped local leaders of their authority and by the introduction of Western customs that alienated the population. The rebellion of 1857, although suppressed, had highlighted the fragility of colonial power and the need for a radical restructuring. In this scenario, Queen Victoria of England was proclaimed Empress of India in 1877. Symbolizing the rise of the British Crown in a land that had for centuries been a mosaic of cultures. This decision was not merely ceremonial, it marked the consolidation of a colonial regime that presented itself as an effort to modernize and civilize, but which in reality would be based on economic exploitation and political control. Under British administration, India was viewed as a source of raw materials and a market for British industries. The railway network, built to facilitate the extraction of resources and the movement of troops, became a symbol of colonial rule, while also connecting distant regions and fostering unexpected cultural exchange. Among the protagonists of this era are key figures such as Lord Canning, the first viceroy after the rebellion, who attempted to implement reforms that would calm tensions. However, his efforts were limited by the deep roots of distrust that the population felt towards the British government. The decisions of British rulers, such as the policy of divide and conquer, often accentuated religious and social divisions, sowing the seeds of future conflicts. The development of events during this period was marked by a series of reforms and policies aimed at consolidating British control. The colonial administration established an educational system that, while introducing critical thinking and Western ideas to an elite, also resulted in a disconnection from local traditions for many. Institutions such as the Imperial Legislative Council, which included some nominated Indian members, were created as a facade of participation, while fundamental decisions remained in British hands. Historians debate whether this was a mere simulation of inclusion or a genuine but limited attempt to integrate the local population into governance. The immediate consequences of the establishment of the British Raj were profound. The Indian economy underwent drastic transformations. Agricultural production was oriented towards British interests, often to the detriment of local self-sufficiency. Export crops such as cotton and indigo replaced food crops, contributing to hunger and malnutrition crises in various regions of the country. Social tensions also increased, as the emerging middle classes, educated in the British system, began to question colonial rule and seek a place in the new order. However, despite the reforms and attempts at appeasement, the legacy of the British Raj was marked by a persistent enigma. Could India truly reconcile its rich cultural heritage with the impositions of a colonial regime? The contradictions of British administration, which promoted modernization while simultaneously maintaining structures of oppression, left a trail of ambiguity regarding the future of the country. Thus, the British Raj not only became a period of control, but also a catalyst for profound change in Indian identity, a process that began to take shape in the shadows of oppression. This chapter of history left questions that persist to this day, raising the question, how did the nationalist sentiment that would soon rise against this control come to be? The answer to that question leads us to the next chapter, where we will explore the emergence of the nationalist movement in India, a phenomenon that was not only fueled by colonial oppression, but also served as a beacon of hope for millions. This crisis would soon give way to a profoundly transformative phenomenon, the emergence of a movement that would challenge British rule and redefine the identity of an entire nation. As the 19th century drew to a close, the atmosphere in India was steeped in tensions. British colonial oppression had generated widespread discontent that loomed like a shadow over the subcontinent. The economy, stripped of its resources by British exploitation, had left millions in poverty. Meanwhile, a new Indian middle class, educated in Western-style institutions, began to emerge, aware of its identity and eager for change. In this context, the echo of a nationalist sentiment began to resonate. The first glimmers of this nationalism manifested in the creation of political organizations. In 1885, a group of intellectuals and local leaders, with the help of a retired British officer, Alan Octavian Hume, founded the Indian National Congress. This body would become the epicenter of the struggle for independence, but its birth was not an isolated act. It was the result of a web of decisions and events that converged at a crucial moment. The leaders who would shape this movement were not merely renowned figures. They were men and women who represented the diversity of the country, from Dadabhai Naoroji, who articulated the drain theory of India's wealth, to Bal Gangadhar Tilak, a fervent advocate of self-governance, Swaraj, and Gopal Krishna Gokhale, who advocated for a more moderate and gradual approach. Ideological differences began to outline the future of the Congress. The decisions of these individuals were marked by a fervent desire for justice and a longing for a free India. The question was how these visions would unite into a single movement. In the years following the creation of the Congress, the political atmosphere became increasingly complex. In 1905, the British government's decision to divide the province of Bengal in an attempt to weaken the growing nationalism provoked a fierce response. The partition not only intensified anti-colonial sentiment, but also united diverse communities in a common front against oppression, giving rise to the Swadeshi movement, which promoted the boycott of British products and the use of local goods. This act, which the British considered a strategy of control, became a symbol of resistance. Alongside this rise in nationalist activity, the emergence of the Indian press also played a crucial role. Newspapers and magazines began to serve as platforms for the dissemination of nationalist ideas. Words became powerful weapons capable of galvanizing the masses and challenging the colonial narrative. The pages were filled with accounts of bravery and resistance, creating a sense of community and purpose. However, the path to independence would be long and fraught with obstacles. The decisions made by the leadership of the Congress during this early period were not always unanimous. The tension between moderates and radicals, between those advocating for a peaceful approach and those demanding more drastic measures, intensified, culminating in the split at Surat in 1907. This internal dilemma raises an intriguing question. Could they truly harmonize their differences to forge a cohesive movement, or were they doomed to fragmentation? Over time, the echo of the struggle for independence would resonate beyond the borders of India. The decisions made in the Indian National Congress attracted the attention of other liberation movements around the world, leading to greater international solidarity. Those early meetings, filled with uncertainty, laid the groundwork for a movement that, despite its divisions, would unite in a common cause: freedom. As nationalists organized and mobilized, the impact of their struggle was felt in every corner of Indian society. The growth of nationalism not only challenged British rule but also reconfigured the cultural and political identity of the country. Resistance became a legacy, an echo of the aspirations of millions who longed to be heard. Yet the path to independence also left questions in the air, unresolved enigmas about the direction the movement would take and the sacrifices that would be demanded. Thus, as the Indian National Congress began to take shape as a powerful entity, the sense of unity and purpose intertwined with uncertainty about the future. Would this new wave of nationalism be sufficient to challenge an empire that had been in power for generations? These questions pressed into the minds of leaders and citizens alike as history prepared to take a decisive turn. The next stage in this historical narrative will focus on one of the most influential figures of the time, Mahatma Gandhi. His approach of non-violent resistance would become a beacon of hope for millions, raising the question of how a single individual can change the course of history. This crisis would soon transform into an ideological battleground. As India entered the 20th century, the echo of the struggle for independence resonated strongly. British oppression had left a deep shadow on the collective psyche, and the population cried out for an alternative to violence. In this context, a figure emerged whose influence would change the course of history: Mahatma Gandhi. His singular approach to non-violent resistance would become a beacon of hope for millions and an enigma for his contemporaries. The political atmosphere of the early 20th century was tense. The First World War had left Great Britain exhausted, and its efforts to maintain control over India were at a critical juncture. The promise of political reforms in exchange for support during the war proved insufficient, leading to growing discontent. In this scenario, Gandhi, a lawyer trained in London and deeply influenced by the philosophies of Tolstoy and Thoreau, returned to India in 1915 after leading civil rights campaigns in South Africa. His vision was clear: independence should not be obtained through violence but through peaceful resistance and civil disobedience. Gandhi had developed his strategy of satyagraha, or force of truth, in South Africa. However, his approach in India would be even bolder. In 1919, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre in Amritsar, where British troops opened fire on an unarmed crowd, sealed his conviction that non-violence was the only possible path. Amidst the horror, his words resonated with an unusual force. Thus, he began to articulate a movement that challenged established norms not only of colonialism but also of the very nature of resistance. The figures surrounding Gandhi on this journey were equally crucial. The Indian National Congress, under Gandhi's leadership, acquired a new sense of unity and purpose. Figures such as Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel became his closest allies, embracing his philosophy and expanding his reach. Through campaigns like the non-cooperation movement from 1920 to 1922, Gandhi mobilized millions in peaceful protests, openly challenging the injustices of British rule. The Salt March in 1930 is perhaps one of the most emblematic episodes of this struggle. Gandhi, in an act of defiance, walked more than 380 kilometers to the coast to collect salt from the sea, challenging the British monopoly and tax on this vital resource. This act of disobedience not only united the nation in a common purpose but also attracted international attention to the Indian struggle. The image of Gandhi, with his simple attire and determined gait, became a symbol of peaceful resistance against tyranny. However, the path was not without obstacles. Gandhi's non-violent resistance often encountered the brutality of colonialism. Peaceful protests were suppressed with violence and many of his followers were imprisoned. Despite this, Gandhi continued to emphasize the importance of non-violence, arguing that the ends do not justify the means. Historians debate whether a peaceful movement could sustain itself in the face of the machinery of war and oppression. The 1930s saw an increase in tension, with the British responding to pressure with a mix of repression and concessions. The passage of the Government of India Act of 1935 brought with it a more autonomous system of governance, but the promises of self-determination felt empty to many. As the Second World War broke out, Gandhi and the Congress launched the Quit India movement in 1942, urging the British to grant immediate independence. His call to action resonated throughout the nation, but it also posed a troubling question. Could non-violence prevail in a world consumed by conflict? The immediate consequences of these decisions were profound. As millions joined the cause, the independence movement gained strength, but it also faced internal divisions, especially with the Muslim League led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, which advocated for a separate state. The idea of independence was not uniform. Different groups had divergent visions for the future of India. The onset of war and subsequent political instability exacerbated these disagreements. The enigma of the chapter looms over the figure of Gandhi. Could his strategy, although powerful and transformative, truly hold up in a context where violence seemed a more immediate and effective response? His legacy would be a subject of debate, and his vision of a united India would confront the challenge of sectarianism and the division that loomed ahead. The secrets of peaceful resistance still awaited full revelation. As the echo of the struggle for independence resonated, the shadows of partition began to draw on the horizon. In the next chapter, we will explore how the quest for freedom would culminate in a tragic and divisive outcome: the Partition of India, an episode that would forever change the fate of the subcontinent. That struggle for independence, which had resonated strongly throughout India, would soon lead to a dramatic and tragic outcome. On the threshold of the decade of the 1940s, India found itself immersed in a deep and multifaceted conflict. The shadow of the Second World War loomed over the world, and the Indian subcontinent, a vast mosaic of cultures, faced a historic crossroads. In this context, the struggle for independence took on new dimensions, and tensions between religious communities began to intensify. The promise of freedom was marked by the echo of division. The political atmosphere, characterized by the growing polarization between Hindus and Muslims, became explosive. The Muslim League, under the leadership of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, increasingly advocated for a separate state for Muslims, arguing that their interests would not be secure in a Hindu-majority India. In this context, the demand for a Pakistan, a land for Muslims, began to gain strength. Meanwhile, the Indian National Congress, led by figures such as Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, advocated for a united and secular India. The question was whether these visions could coexist in such a tension-filled environment. As the war progressed, pressure on the British increased. With the arrival of 1942, the Quit India movement, driven by Gandhi, called for the end of British rule. Colonial authorities responded with a harsh crackdown, arresting numerous nationalist leaders. However, the will for independence was solidifying. The year 1945 marked the end of the war in Europe and the election of a new Labour government in Britain, more favourable to decolonisation. The British, weakened by the war, no longer had the capacity or the will to maintain their empire. The year 1947 became a turning point. The British decision to leave India was dramatic and sudden. It was the result of a combination of factors: the pressure from independence movements, international public opinion, and the difficulty of managing a declining empire. The promise of independence, however, was not without a dark shadow: the partition of the country. In a series of hurried negotiations, Lord Mountbatten, the last viceroy, oversaw the plan to draw the borders of a new country, Pakistan, which would separate from India. This division, carried out by the British lawyer Cyril Radcliffe, who had never been to India before, was marked by a stroke on the map and a torrent of deep traumas. The consequences of this partition were devastating. Millions of people were forced to leave their homes in a massive exodus, crossing newly established borders. The result was one of the largest and most violent migrations in history, with an estimated 15 million people displaced and between hundreds of thousands and 2 million dead in the sectarian violence that erupted. Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs became victims of a struggle they had not desired, trapped in a web of hatred and fear. The question that resonates is how an act of liberation could lead to such devastation. As India prepared for its independence on the 15th of August 1947, the new state of Pakistan made its debut a day earlier, on the 14th of August. The celebrations of freedom were overshadowed by human suffering and loss. The euphoria of independence quickly turned into an echo of pain and desolation. The legacies of this partition still resonate in the politics and society of both countries, leaving unanswered questions about identity, belonging, and the future. The enigma of the partition of India is not limited to the political decisions of leaders and governments. It extends to the depths of the collective psyche of two nations, marked by shared trauma and a yearning for reconciliation. Can the wound of such a deep division truly heal, or is it destined to be a constant echo of what might have been? The decisions of that summer of 1947 shaped not only the present of India and Pakistan, but also their future. The struggle to define a national identity amidst diversity and conflict became the new challenge that both countries would face. Thus, as India celebrated its independence, a new chapter of challenges and conflicts emerged that would shape its contemporary history. With India and Pakistan newly born and the wounds still open, the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru emerged as a central figure in the construction of a modern nation. But what decisions would he make to navigate through the turbulent waters of a new independent state? History was just beginning to unveil its secrets. This crisis would soon reveal itself as the prelude to a new era, one that promised the construction of a modern and democratic nation. In the echo of independence, the shadows of a colonial past still loomed over India. The partition had left deep scars, and the country, divided by religions and lines of blood, cried out for leadership that could unite it and guide it toward an uncertain future. Amidst this chaos, a central figure emerged: Jawaharlal Nehru. Born into a family of political elite, Nehru had been educated in Western traditions, a legacy that placed him in a unique position to lead. His vision of an independent India was not limited to the mere liberation from British rule. He aspired to forge a nation where modernity, science, and democracy coexisted in harmony. But how would he confront the challenges that lay before him? The political context at this time was complex. India, after gaining its independence in August 1947, found itself in a state of turmoil. Religious tensions had erupted into violence, prompting the forced migration of millions. The economy, devastated by years of colonial exploitation, required urgent reconstruction. Nehru, as Prime Minister, stood at the crossroads of history, a leader who had to decide the course of a fragmented nation. His first notable decision was to oversee the drafting of a new constitution, a bold step that promised to give voice to all segments of Indian society. This movement, however, was not straightforward. The divisions were palpable, and the distrust between communities still throbbed strongly. Nehru, aware of the delicate balance he needed to maintain, began to establish a government that reflected the plurality of India. The construction of a national identity became his priority, and in 1950 the new Constitution of India was adopted, proclaiming the country as a sovereign, socialist, secular and democratic republic. But could this constitution truly unite such a diverse people? As the decade of the 1950s progressed, Nehru implemented a series of policies aimed at modernizing the Indian economy through industrialization and centralized planning. Inspired in part by the Soviet model, his focus on education and science materialized in the creation of renowned institutions such as the Indian Institutes of Technology. Nehru believed that an educated populace and a solid scientific foundation were the keys to a prosperous India. However, his idealism clashed with the harsh reality of an economy still in development. Poverty and illiteracy remained pervasive. In this context, Nehru's figure began to be questioned. As the expectations of the population grew, so did the criticisms of his government. Some argued that his focus on heavy industry had overlooked the needs of agriculture. The shadow of discontent loomed over his leadership, and tensions escalated, both internal and external. In 1962, India became embroiled in a border conflict with China, a confrontation that revealed the weaknesses of its defense strategy and the lack of preparedness of the Indian army. The defeat on the battlefield resonated strongly in public opinion, fueling discontent toward a leader whom many considered idealistic. Despite these challenges, Nehru continued to promote his ideals of non-alignment in foreign policy, seeking to position India as a leader in the movement of non-aligned countries during the Cold War. His desire for a strong and respected India on the world stage was unwavering, but historians debate to what extent his aspirations were realistic in such a polarized world. Nehru's death in 1964 marked a milestone in the history of India. His legacy, though controversial, left a profound mark on national identity. His vision of a modern and democratic India had been sown, but the seeds of his idealism also left behind a riddle. Could India, despite the challenges, live up to that vision? At the crossroads of its history, India faced an uncertain future. As the shadow of Nehru faded, questions about the nation's future became more pressing. The struggle to define what it truly meant to be independent had only just begun, the echo of his decisions still resonating in the corners of politics and society posed questions that would persist over time. Wars with Pakistan and China loomed, as did the economic and social reforms that would define post-independence India. On the horizon, tensions and challenges awaited that would test the very structure of the nation. History still had many secrets to reveal. This crisis would soon transform into a battlefield where national identity and geopolitical challenges intertwined. In post-independence India, the echo of the struggle for freedom was challenged by a reality far more complex than the simple emancipation from colonial rulers. The young nation, newly born in 1947, faced a landscape of internal and external tensions that threatened its stability. The historical context preceding the conflicts between India and its neighbours, Pakistan and China, is crucial. Following the partition, the creation of Pakistan left a legacy of distrust and rivalry. From the outset, the relationship between India and Pakistan was characterized by a series of territorial disputes. the most significant of which was over the region of Kashmir, an area of strategic and symbolic importance. In this tumultuous environment, figures such as Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the first Governor-General of Pakistan, played decisive roles. Nehru, with his vision of a secular and unified India, faced the harsh reality of a neighbour aspiring to claim territories that India considered its own. In 1947, shortly after independence, the first armed conflicts erupted, culminating in the First Indo-Pakistani War of 1947 to 1948. This war not only left a tragic toll but also established a pattern of hostility that would endure. On the opposite side of the subcontinent, China, under the leadership of Mao Zedong, was beginning to emerge as a power that would also challenge India's territorial integrity. In 1962, a brief but devastating war broke out between India and China over border disputes in the Himalayas. This conflict revealed the weaknesses of the Indian armed forces. Nehru's leadership, which had bet on diplomacy and non-alignment, was called into question after the defeat. The shadow of war loomed over the young nation, raising questions about its ability to defend itself. As these wars shaped India's destiny, the country also began to experience significant internal change. Independence had brought with it a clamour for social justice and equality, driven by leaders such as B.R. Ambedkar, the architect of the Constitution, who advocated for the rights of the untouchables and the elimination of the caste system. Thus, the enigma of post-independence India lay not only in its struggle against external enemies, but also in its ability to forge an inclusive national identity. Economic and social reforms became imperative. In the 1950s, Nehru's government implemented a series of policies aimed at modernization and development, seeking to transform an agrarian economy into an industrialized one. The five-year plan of 1951 marked the beginning of an era of centralized planning. However, these reforms were not without challenges and criticisms, as the results were uneven and bureaucracy often hindered progress. The intersection of military conflicts and social reforms posed a crucial dilemma. Could a nation struggling for its territorial integrity also advance in building a more equitable society? As the years progressed, internal tensions intensified, with separatist movements emerging in various regions, challenging the cohesion of the country. The shadow of war and economic instability created an atmosphere of uncertainty. The immediate consequences of these wars and reforms were profound. The First War with Pakistan not only resulted in the consolidation of the conflict over Kashmir, but also served to strengthen Indian national identity. Nevertheless, the human cost was high. Regarding the confrontation with China, its impact was felt in the restructuring of the Indian armed forces, which were compelled to modernize. However, at the core of these decisions and events loomed an enigma. Could India truly find a balance between its territorial defense and the creation of a more just society? Economic reforms, while necessary, faced the harsh reality of corruption and persistent inequalities. The question that arose was unsettling. Would India be able to navigate the turbulent waters of war and social reform without losing sight of its goal of being a united and democratic nation? The history of India, marked by its wars and reforms, is also the story of its resilience. As the country moved into the following decades, the echo of these conflicts would resonate in the political and social decisions that would shape its future. The struggle for identity, justice, and peace continued. Thus, in this tumultuous landscape, post-independence India became a microcosm of aspirations and contradictions. The legacy of conflicts and reforms not only defined the present, but also sowed the seeds of an uncertain future. As the nation advanced, the persistent question lingered in the air. Could India, in its quest for a place in the world, reconcile its past with its aspirations for greatness? As the curtain of history rises to reveal the next phase, the economic reforms of 1991 emerge as a crucial point, where liberalization would challenge established paradigms and transform the economy in a new global scenario. This crisis would soon give way to a radical transformation that would change the course of India forever. In 1991, the echo of economic instability resonated in every corner of the country. A legacy of decades of protectionist policies that had left the nation trapped in a cycle of low growth. Amid this storm, a group of visionary leaders was preparing to unleash a change that would integrate India into the vast fabric of the global economy. Economic liberalization. The political and social environment preceding these reforms was tense and critical. After independence, India had adopted a development model based on socialism where the state played a central role. However, by the late 1980s, problems had accumulated. Foreign exchange reserves were alarmingly low, inflation was high, and the fiscal deficit threatened the economic stability of the country. There was a palpable sense that the country needed to free itself from the chains of an economic model that had proven ineffective. On the 24th of July in 1991, the then Minister of Finance, Manmohan Singh, under the government of Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, presented a budget that would change history. With a determined approach, Singh introduced a package of reforms aimed at liberalizing the economy, eliminating restrictions on foreign investment and opening the doors to international trade. This decision was driven not only by the urgency of the economic crisis, but also by the need to obtain a loan from the International Monetary Fund, which required structural reforms. As Indian leaders immersed themselves in the monumental task of redefining the economic landscape, other key players emerged. Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, a shrewd and pragmatic politician, became the political architect of these reforms. His vision was based on the belief that liberalization was not only necessary, but inevitable. However, his approach faced criticism, especially from those who feared that market opening would lead to greater inequality and the erosion of economic sovereignty. Events unfolded rapidly. The Indian government eliminated the Licence Raj, a complex system of industrial licenses, reduced tariffs and facilitated the entry of foreign capital. The response was immediate. Growth began to rebound and the information technology and services sectors flourished. India transformed into an attractive destination for foreign investments, and Indian companies began to compete on a global stage. However, the path was not without challenges. The resistance from some sectors of the population, who felt that their interests were being sacrificed on the altar of the free market, resonated like a persistent echo. The immediate consequences of these reforms were profound. The Indian economy, which had been stagnant, began to take off. Between 1991 and 2000, the growth of gross domestic product accelerated, and the middle class emerged strongly. However, at the same time, the rise of inequality and social tensions began to surface. The question that arose was whether this was truly the path to progress for all, or if it was an illusion that concealed deep divisions. As economic liberalization advanced, a new enigma emerged. Had India truly been able to balance economic growth with social justice? The reforms of 1991 had opened a new chapter in India's history, but they also left unanswered questions. What secrets still awaited in the depths of this transformation? Could India, while navigating the turbulent waters of globalization, maintain its identity and social cohesion? As the lights shone on the new economic landscape, an even greater challenge loomed on the horizon. With the economy expanding, India would face the monumental task of addressing the issues of infrastructure, education, and health that threatened to hinder its ascent. In the next chapter, we will explore how these issues would become the center of debate in 21st century India, a country that, with its diversity and dynamism, sought not only to survive but to thrive in a constantly changing world. That economic transformation that began in the decade of the 1990s would soon trigger a series of challenges and achievements that would define India in the 21st century. In a global context marked by interconnection, India emerged as a vital player, but not without facing shadows that threatened its rise. The blend of its rich heritage, its vast diversity, and contemporary challenges presented a fascinating enigma. Could India, with its ancestral legacy and vibrant youth, become a global power? At the threshold of the new millennium, India found itself at a crossroads. Economic liberalization had opened the doors to foreign investment and technological growth. However, the legacy of colonialism and deep social divisions continued to resonate. Poverty and inequality loomed as persistent shadows, challenging economic growth. Thus, the country embarked on a journey of transformation. Among the key figures of this period was Manmohan Singh, the architect of the reforms who became Prime Minister in 2004. His leadership marked a milestone, driving an agenda of inclusive growth. However, Singh would also face criticism for the corruption that permeated politics, an echo of the challenges that had plagued the country for decades. The decisions of his government would be crucial in determining the course of contemporary India. Simultaneously, the rise of technology companies such as Infosys and Wipro symbolized the arrival of a new era. The mystery of the growth of the Indian technology sector lay in its ability to merge innovation with a skilled workforce, creating a vibrant ecosystem. However, this prosperity was not distributed equitably. While cities flourished, rural areas remained trapped in poverty. The contrast was palpable. How could India reconcile its rich heritage with the need for equitable development? As the 21st century progressed, India faced global challenges. Climate change emerged as an unavoidable threat, endangering agriculture and food security. The Indian government, aware of the echo of scientific warnings, began to formulate policies to mitigate these effects. However, effective implementation remained a puzzle. Could India, with its vast resources, find the solution to this environmental enigma? Internal conflicts also raised questions. The growing tension between different religious and ethnic communities, exacerbated by polarizing politics, created a climate of instability. Divisive rhetoric, especially under the government of the Bharatiya Janata Party and its leader Narendra Modi, elected in 2014, provoked reflections on the true meaning of unity in diversity. Would it be possible to build a strong nation amid such divisions? On the international stage, India projected itself as a counterbalance to the rise of China, seeking to establish strategic alliances. Participation in summits such as the G20 and its role in organizations like BRICS underscored its ambition. However, border tensions with Pakistan and China remained a reminder that the path to global prominence was not without obstacles. Decisions in national security would have lasting repercussions, raising questions about India's defense strategy. As the 21st century advances, India's cultural legacy is also undergoing reconfiguration. Indian youth, driven by technology, constantly redefine social norms. From feminist movements to the fight for the rights of LGBTQ communities, the country witnesses an awakening of social consciousness. However, resistance to change also manifests, creating a clash between tradition and modernity. Could India balance its rich traditions with the demands of an evolving society? The events of this contemporary era leave a profound echo on the future of the country. The achievements and challenges of India in the 21st century are not mere anecdotes, they are chapters in an ever-evolving narrative. The lingering question is, can India overcome the shadows of its past and embrace a future in which its potential as a global power is fully realized? Thus, we find ourselves at the threshold of a new exploration, a quest that will lead us to unravel the rich diversity that composes modern India. In the next chapter, we will delve into the vast cultural, religious, and linguistic mosaic that defines the national identity of this country. As we step into the threshold of modern India, it is impossible not to recall the echoes of the struggles that defined the path to independence. The shadow of past conflicts and the aspirations of a people have left an indelible mark. However, in this vast land where diversity flourishes, an even deeper enigma begins to reveal itself. How has India, with its rich cultural, religious, and linguistic diversity, forged a national identity that resonates powerfully in the contemporary world? The context surrounding this question is of vital importance. Since independence in 1947, India has faced monumental challenges. the creation of a state that represented such a diverse population, composed of hundreds of ethnic groups and thousands of dialects, was an almost titanic task. In a country where differences run as deep as the rivers that traverse it, the notion of a unified identity seemed, in many ways, an unattainable dream. The leaders of post-colonial India, such as Jawaharlal Nehru and B.R. Ambedkar, confronted this issue with determination. Nehru advocated for a secular and multicultural vision. His decisions, from promoting education to defending the rights of minorities, were fundamental in establishing a framework where all voices could be heard. For his part, Ambedkar, the architect of the Constitution, fought for social equality and the elimination of caste discrimination, promoting a sense of identity that transcended traditional divisions. Both understood that unity did not mean homogeneity, but rather mutual recognition and respect. As these events unfolded, India found itself on a path filled with ups and downs. From the establishment of a democratic political system to the struggle against inequality, the challenges were constant. In the following decades, India experienced significant economic growth, but also faced sectarian and regional tensions that threatened the fragile fabric of national unity. The question that arose was, could diversity be India's strength or its weakness? The immediate consequences of these decisions were palpable. The adoption of a constitution that guaranteed fundamental rights laid the groundwork for a more just social order. However, at the same time, divisions between communities became more evident, leading to episodes of violence. India found itself at a crossroads where diversity could be both a blessing and a curse. The enigma of this chapter looms over the question, how can such a diverse nation find a path toward cohesion without sacrificing its rich cultural heritage? As the years progressed, modern India began to redefine itself, seeking answers to this question. At the heart of this quest are the languages that resonate throughout the subcontinent. More than 1,600 languages are spoken in India. Hindi and English are the official languages of the government. But regional languages such as Bengali, Telugu and Marathi also play a crucial role. This linguistic kaleidoscope not only enriches cultural life, but also raises vital questions about communication. The answer perhaps lies in the spirit of India itself, a commitment to dialogue and coexistence. Religion, another fundamental pillar, presents an equally complicated landscape. Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Sikhism and other faiths coexist in a subtle dance. India is in many ways a laboratory of religious coexistence where festivals like Diwali and Eid are celebrated in the same breath. However, this very environment can become fertile ground for conflict. History has shown that the manipulation of religious identities can be a double-edged sword. How can India maintain its pluralistic spirit in a world that often seems to lean toward polarization? In recent years, the role of technology and social media has added another layer to this complex narrative. Globalization has allowed for greater interconnectedness, but it has also exposed society to new divisions. The dissemination of information, often biased, can reinforce stereotypes. As young Indians navigate this digital landscape, a troubling question arises. Can the new generation find a path toward unity without relinquishing its diversity? The story of modern India is a testament to resilience and adaptation. Yet, as we reflect on this legacy, the echo of questions endures. Is India's diversity its greatest strength or its greatest challenge? How can a country that bears the weight of its history find a path toward the future where plurality is seen as an opportunity? In this journey toward understanding Indian diversity, it is vital to remember that history is not set in stone. Every day, the citizens of this nation continue to weave their narrative. Diversity is not just a fact, it is a legacy, a promise that in the union of its differences, India can find its true destiny. As we close this chapter, the story of modern India reveals itself in all its complexity. Diversity is not only a source of pride, but also a constant challenge. In the echo of its traditions, India invites us to reflect on the meaning of identity in a divided world. Thus, the legacy of this nation resonates, reminding us that true strength lies in the ability to embrace our differences. In this vast and enigmatic country, diversity presents itself not as an obstacle but as a pathway to understanding. Thus, modern India strives not only to be a country but a symbol of unity in diversity, a beacon of hope in a world seeking its own identity.